Welcome to this deep dive and perfect timing, right? Spooky season is upon us, and we were talking about something that I think gets to the heart of what makes a villain truly terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
Knife-wielding baddies.
Yeah.
We got an article sent in from brute2forge.com called Five of the Most Prolific Knife-Wielding Villains, written by Xavier Davis,
Okay.
and it sparked a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
Why are knives so effective
Right.
at making these characters so scary?
I think it's fascinating, right? It's like it goes beyond just the sharpness of the object.
Yeah.
There's something primal about a knife that taps into our deepest fears.
Yeah. It's like, even if you've never been threatened with one, there's just that instinctual unease about that blade.
Exactly. Knives are one of humanity's oldest weapons.
Right.
They represent vulnerability, a
Yeah.
closeness that you don't get with something like a gun.
Right.
Horror films have been exploiting this for ages,
Yeah.
using knives to heighten tension and make those jump scares hit even harder.
Let's get into the villains. The article starts with the Joker from The Dark Knight. And I have to say, Heath Ledger's performance still gives me chills.
Oh, he's so good in that role.
Oh my God.
He really brings a new level of menace to the character.
Yes.
What's unsettling about this Joker is that he represents pure chaos.
Yeah.
He's unpredictable, and his use of knives just adds to that feeling of being completely out of control.
Yeah. There's that one scene where he holds the blade up to the guy's mouth. And it's not just the violence. It's
Right.
It's like he wants to be right there up close
Yeah.
to inflict that terror
Yes.
on a very personal level.
It's psychological torture as much as it is physical.
Yes.
He's asserting his power in a way that's incredibly disturbing, and I think Ledger's performance really did cement this Joker as a modern horror icon.
Yeah. Absolutely no arguments there.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. And his weapon of choice is a little more creative.
Yeah, a little more creative.
Wow.
The infamous bladed glove. It's become as iconic as Freddy himself, instantly recognizable and terrifying.
Oh, it's pure nightmare fuel. And speaking of nightmares,
Yes.
Freddy literally attacks us where we are most vulnerable
Yeah.
in our dream.
Precisely. He weaponizes our deepest fears and anxieties.
Yeah.
And the bladed glove, it's not just a weapon.
Right.
It's an extension of his power.
Yeah. Like, you can't reason with a bladed glove.
Right.
It's just designed to maim and kill, and it makes Freddy seem
Yeah.
almost unstoppable.
It does.
Okay, switching gears a bit, let's talk about Michael Myers
Okay.
from Halloween.
Right.
He's like the classic example of less is more horror.
Sure.
The silence, the mask, that relentless pursuit.
What makes Michael so chilling is that he's like a source of nature. He's
Yeah.
void of emotion, unstoppable.
Yes.
And in stark contrast to Freddy's more elaborate weapon, he just carries a simple kitchen knife.
It's something you can find in any household, which I think almost makes it scarier
Right.
because it's like this is a threat that could be lurking anywhere.
Exactly. It adds a level of plausibility to his terror. And that image of Michael Myers slowly stalking his victims with that raised kitchen knife is just burned into our cultural understanding of horror.
Yeah, he embodies like pure evil.
Right.
And that simple knife somehow just makes it even more real.
Yes.
Even more terrifying.
I agree.
Ready for a villain who takes things in a completely different direction?
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about Chucky
Okay. Chucky.
from Child's Play.
Yeah.
He's a fascinating case.
Right. It's amazing how much terror they managed to pack into that little red-headed doll.
I know.
Like, he should be cute,
He should be.
but he's anything but.
I think it's that subversion of expectations that makes Chucky so effective.
Right.
We associate dolls with innocence, playfulness, and then you have this murderous entity wielding a knife and wreaking havoc.
Right.
It completely messes with our sense of what's safe.
And the contrast, right. His appearance, his voice, those one-liners.
Right.
And then, bam, brutal knife attack.
It's so disturbing.
It's so disturbing.
Yeah. All right. Ready for our final knife-wielding villain. This one is shrouded in mystery.
Okay, let's talk about Ghostface.
Yes.
From Scream. Now, unlike the other villains we've discussed, Ghostface isn't one single character.
Right.
The identity behind the mask changes with each film.
Which makes it even scarier.
It does.
It's that anyone could be the killer aspect,
Yeah.
that paranoia, that distrust that makes those movies so effective.
Exactly. You never know who to trust, who might be lurking behind that mask, ready to strike.
And yet, one thing remains constant.
What's that?
That hunting knife. It's
Yes.
the one element that ties all the ghost faces together.
You're absolutely right. The mask may change, the motives might differ, but that knife is a consistent symbol of terror throughout the entire franchise.
So we've got 5 very different villains here, all wielding knives in ways that tap into our deepest fears. But what's the common thread?
Mm.
What makes them so effective beyond just the weapon itself?
Well, what's fascinating is that they each exploit our vulnerabilities in different ways. The Joker thrives on chaos and unpredictability.
Uh-huh.
Freddy invades the safe space of our dreams.
Yeah?
Michael embodies this relentless force of evil.
Yeah.
Chucky perverts our sense of safety and innocence,
Mhm.
while Ghostface makes us question everyone around us.
And in each case, the knife just amplifies that fear.
Yes.
Makes the threat feel more real, more immediate, more personal.
Mm.
It's a reminder that even the simplest objects can become symbols of great power, both positive and negative.
It's true, a knife can be a tool for creation sustenance, but it can also be a weapon of terror.
It's all about perception, isn't it?
Yeah.
How we use and interpret objects can have profound consequences.
Exactly. So the next time you see a knife, whether it's in a movie, in a museum, or even just in your kitchen drawer,
Yeah.
take a moment to think about all the layers of meaning it holds.
Wow, that's a great point. And maybe think twice before you anger any knife-wielding villains.
Indeed, discretion is always the better part of valor, especially when sharp objects are involved.
So what stands out to you from our deep dive so far? We've talked about how these villains use knives to tap into our primal fears.
Yeah.
But do you see any other connections, any broader themes emerging?
What's really interesting to me is how each of these villains, despite their differences, they all use the knife to amplify their own specific brand of horror.
Yeah.
The Joker's is chaos, Freddy's is psychological, Michael's is relentless.
Right.
Chucky's plays on the subversion of the familiar, and Ghostface embodies paranoia.
That's a great observation. So it's
Right.
like the knife isn't just a weapon, it's a storytelling tool.
Right.
A way to make their villainy even more impactful.
Precisely. It adds this layer of symbolism that speaks to something deeper within us. And that brings me to another point. We've been focusing on fictional villains,
Yeah.
but knives hold a lot of symbolic weight in the real world, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just think about how often knives appear in mythology, religious ceremonies, even everyday expressions,
Yeah.
like stabbed in the back, cutting ties. We use knife imagery all the time to talk about emotions and relationships.
Exactly. In some cultures, knives are associated with protection, warding off evil.
Mhm.
In others, they represent sacrifice or even coming-of-age rituals.
Wow.
It's amazing how such a simple object can carry so much meaning.
It's almost like the knife itself is a blank slate,
Yeah.
and we project our own fears, desires, and beliefs onto it.
That's a very insightful way to put it. And I think that's part of what makes knife-wielding villains so effective in horror. They're tapping into this pre-existing well of symbolism,
Right.
taking something that already has a lot of emotional weight and twisting it, perverting it for their own terrifying purposes.
Like we already have this innate unease about knives.
Yes.
This understanding of their potential for harm, and these villains just exploit that,
Right.
using the knife to
Right.
make us feel even more vulnerable,
Right.
even more afraid.
It's like they're reminding us of our own mortality, our own fragility. A knife attack is so personal, so up close, that it bypasses our rational defenses and hits us on a deeply visceral level.
It's true. I mean, a gun can kill you from a distance, but a knife requires that physical closeness,
Yeah.
that violation of personal space.
Yes.
It's just unsettling.
Absolutely. And filmmakers understand this.
Uh-huh.
They use knives to create suspense, to build tension, to make us feel truly uncomfortable.
Right.
Think about the iconic shower scene in Psycho, for example.
Oh, man, Psycho. That scene is a masterclass in knife-wielding terror.
It is.
Slow
Wow.
build up, the vulnerability of the victim, the sudden violence.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant filmmaking.
And the fact that you never actually see the knife penetrate the skin makes it even more disturbing.
Oh, right.
It's all implied, which forces the audience to fill in the blanks with their own imagination.
And our imaginations can be pretty brutal,
They can.
especially when it comes to something as primal as a knife attack.
Precisely. That power of suggestion is what makes horror so effective. They give us just enough to get our hearts racing, and then let our minds do the rest.
So it's like a shared nightmare where we all know the rules,
Yeah.
we all understand the danger, And we're all choosing to experience that thrill of fear together.
Yes, and the villains with their knives glinting in the darkness.
Yeah.
They're the ones guiding us through that nightmare.
Yes.
They're the masters of ceremony, the ones who hold the power to make us scream, to make us jump, to make us feel truly alive in that moment of shared fear.
Wow. That's a pretty profound way to think about it.
Hmm?
So as we wrap up our exploration of these villains,
Yeah.
what's the key takeaway? What should our listener be thinking about as they go back to their own lives, armed with this newfound knowledge about knife-wielding baddies?
I think the biggest takeaway is that symbolism matters.
Okay.
Even the simplest objects can be imbued with incredible power,
Yeah.
both positive and negative. A knife can be a tool for creation, for sustenance, for protection,
Right.
but it can also be a weapon of terror, a symbol of violence and fear.
It's a good reminder that the meaning we ascribe to objects can have real-world consequences.
Exactly. So the next time you encounter a knife, whether it's in a movie, in a museum, or even just in your own kitchen, take a moment to think about the layers of meaning it holds.
And maybe think twice before you anger any knife-wielding villains out there.
Indeed, discretion is always the better part of valor, especially when sharp objects are involved.
Well, that was fascinating.
It was.
But before we wrap up completely,
Uh,
I have to ask, what about you? What stands out to you the most about the connection between knives and horror?
What really strikes me is how these filmmakers have managed to take something so ordinary, so everyday, like you said,
Yeah.
a knife, we all have them in our kitchens.
Right.
But in the hands of these villains, it becomes something else entirely.
It's like they've tapped into this collective unconscious, this shared understanding of the knife's potential for both good and evil.
Exactly. And by using it in such creative and disturbing ways, they've managed to create some of the most iconic and terrifying moments in horror history.
Well said. I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on today, from the psychological nuances of these villains to the broader symbolism of knives in our culture.
We have. And if you're interested in exploring these themes further, I highly recommend checking out more articles over at brutedeforge.com.
Yes.
They have a ton of great content on all sorts of fascinating topics, from pop culture to history to psychology.
Definitely, their article on knife-wielding villains was our jumping-off point for this deep dive, and I'm sure you'll find plenty more to pique your curiosity over there.
Oh, yeah.
So go check them out. And until next time, keep those deep dive suggestions coming.
Absolutely. We're always looking for new and intriguing topics to explore.
That's all for today, folks. Thanks for joining us on this thrilling and slightly unsettling journey into the world of knife-wielding villains.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and maybe keep those kitchen knives safely tucked away.
And remember, the world is full of fascinating mysteries, just waiting to be uncovered.